Mao Zedong, the controversial legacy of China's revolutionary leader. Mao Zedong is widely considered to have been one of the 20th century's most influential figures, one that divides opinion, mostly depending upon your political leaning or location within the world. There can be no doubt that he set the path that transformed China into a leading world power through advancing the levels of literacy, women's rights, basic levels of healthcare, education, and an overall improvement in life expectancy. While critics of his policies would like to remain focused on negative aspects of Mao Zedong, and there were several, in China is still today, nearly 50 years since his passing, revered as an ideological figurehead and holds prominent influence over the international communist movement, while being endowed fondly with remembrance, admiration, as well as his cult of personality. It had been my original intention to make this a single video about Mao Zedong, but after some research I feel there is too much information to make just a single video, so it's now my plan to make a short series about the founder of the People's Republic of China. Mao Zedong, who lived from the 26th of December 1893 until the 9th of September 1976, was a Chinese politician, a Marxist theorist, a military strategist, a poet, as well as a revolutionary. He was responsible for founding the People's Republic of China, leading the country from its becoming established in 1949 until the time of his death in 1976. Born in the village of Shaoshan in China's Hunan province, his father, Mao Yishan, had risen from the role of an impoverished peasant to one of the wealthiest farmers in Shaoshan. Mao Zedong described his father as a stern disciplinarian, while his mother, Wen Qimei, was a devout Buddhist, the opposite to the strict regime instilled by his father. At the age of 13, he completed his education and he found himself in an arranged marriage to 17-year-old Luo Yeshua, a move seen to unite two land-owning families. Mao Zedong refused to recognize her as his wife, and later became a fierce critic of the practice of arranged marriages. Luo was locally disgraced and died in 1910 at the age of 21. An avid reader, including translated versions of Western authors such as Adam Smith, George Washington, and Napoleon Bonaparte, his political views were further shaped after protests in the capital of Hunan province, Changsha, following a famine when armed forces suppressed the dissenters and the leaders of the protest were executed. The famine spread to the family farm, where peasants took his father's grain. Mao disapproved of their actions while claiming sympathy over the situation those people found themselves in. In 1911, Mao returned to education, where first he was bullied for his peasant background before moving to Changsha, where revolutionary sentiment was high, with growing animosity toward the absolute monarchy of Emperor Puyi. The figurehead for the Republicans was an American-educated Christian named Sun Yat-sen. Mao wrote in a school essay for Sun to become president. The army rose up in support of Sun across southern China, which sparked into life the Xinhai Revolution. The governor of Changsha fled the city. Mao joined the rebel army as a soldier in support of the revolution, but was not involved in any combat. The northern provinces remained loyal to the emperor, but the monarchy was abolished and monarchist general Yuan Shikai was installed as the president of the Republic of China. After just 6 months as a soldier, Mao quit the army, and over the next few years he enrolled, then dropped out of a police academy, a soap production school, a law school, and an economics school. Mao considered himself an intellectual and considered himself better than working class people. He considered strong individuals were not bound by moral codes. However, his father saw no use in the intellectual pursuits of his son and cut off his allowance. Undeterred, Mao moved into a hostel for the destitute. With a desire to teach, Mao enrolled at the in Changsha, where he was soon elected into student society and led protests against school rules. Becoming increasingly interested in the techniques of war, he took an interest in World War I and formed the renovation of the People's Study Party in 1918. Many of the 70 or 80 members would later go on to join the Communist Party. After graduating, Mao moved to Beijing, where he secured a job as a librarian under the guidance of Li Dazhao, who would become one of China's early leading communists. His time in Beijing ended in the spring of 1919, where he travelled to Shanghai, not returning to his family home even when his parents died in October 1919 and January 1920. Ma began teaching history at a private school in Changsha, as well as helping to organise protests, form student associations and a weekly radical magazine. Within his writing were calls for the liberation of women in Chinese society. Mao married Yang Kaihui in the winter of 1920. The next stage of Mao's political career saw the founding of the Chinese Communist Party in 1921, with Mao setting up a branch of the party in Changsha. By that year's end, small Marxist groups existed in Beijing, Shanghai, Changsha, Wuhan, Guangzhou and Jinan, with the first central meeting taking place in Shanghai on July 23, 1921, with just 13 delegates. The Chinese authorities sent a police spy to the conference, so they moved to a small boat on the South Lake, close to Jiaxing in Zhejiang province, to avoid being detected. Mao was appointed party secretary for Hunan province, organising several administrative organisations and strike action. Mao's wife Yang Kaihui worked on women's rights, including literacy and education within the poor peasant communities. This work did not go unnoticed, and Mao was invited by Chen Dushui to become a member of the Communist Party's Central Committee. At this time, there were close alliances with the KMT, and Mao helped promote propaganda for their cause. Mao was also outspoken on the governments of Japan, the UK, and the USA, claiming the latter were the most murderous of hangmen. Mao operated several training institutes for the KMT, even running the risk of becoming too involved in their policies over those of the Communist Party. The death of KMT party leader Sun Yat-sen in May 1925 and its replacement in Chiang Kai-shek led to marginalizing the KMT from the Communists. However, Mao was still in support of them when they embarked upon the Northern Expedition attack in 1926 on warlords. The result of the attack saw peasants rise up against wealthy landowners, some of whom were members of the KMT. Civil War in China. 1927 saw the Nanchang and Autumn Harvest uprisings. These occurred after the success of the Northern Expedition, after Chiang had turned on the Communists, who by that time could be counted in the tens of thousands all across China. Ignoring the orders of the KMT government in Wuhan, Chiang marched on Shanghai, controlled by communist militias. As the communists awaited his arrival, 5,000 people were massacred before he got to Shanghai in what was described as White Terror. 19 communists were killed in Beijing, and tens of thousands of communists and others suspected of being communists were killed, with the CCP losing around 15,000 of its approximate number of 25,000 members. On the 15th of July, the Wuhan government expelled all communists from the KMT. This saw the foundation of the Workers' and Peasants' Red Army of China, usually referred to as simply the Red Army, to battle the forces of Chiang. On the 1st of August 1927, the Nanchang Uprising saw the communists take the city, but after 5 days they were forced to retreat to Fujian province. Upon his being appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Red Army, Mao Zedong led 4 regiments into Changsha in what became known as the Autumn Harvest Uprising. One of his 4 regiments deserted to the KMT course, and the attack was not successful. Accepting defeat, he led 1,000 survivors east into the Jinggan Mountains in Jiangxi province. While based in Jiangxi, Mao was expelled from the CCP Central Committee as well as the Hunan Provincial Committee as punishment for his military opportunism. In response to this, Mao ignored them, establishing his base in the Jinggan Mountains, where he united 5 villages while helping with the confiscation of land from rich landlords. While there, he promoted literacy in addition to land redistribution. These actions transformed the social and economic life of villagers and brought in several local supporters. Mao extended his army to around 1,800 soldiers and moulded them into a disciplined but efficient force. In the spring of 1928, despite being out of favour with the CCP Central Committee, Mao received orders to move to southern Hunan, and with some scepticism, he complied. On reaching Hunan, they were attacked by the KMT and suffered heavy losses. While they were in Hunan, the KMT also attacked Mao's base in Jinggan. Uniting with a CCP regiment, they then attempted to retake their Jianggan base, and several weeks of guerrilla warfare took place in the mountains around Jinggan. When the Central Committee ordered Mao to march to Hunan again, he refused, remaining at his base. His dwindling army fought off KMT attacks for 25 days before they were joined by reinforcements, including KMT defectors. That winter, with food shortages, there was not enough food to feed the army existing in the mountains. During 1928, after meeting Zedong, the couple married and later had 6 children. Jiangxi Soviet Republic of China. This independent government was established by Mao Zedong in Jiangxi province from 1931 until 1934. This small state within a state provided Mao with experience in guerrilla warfare and organisation of peasants that would later be used in the late 1940s to seize power and the formation of the People's Republic of China in 1949. While living in the mountains of Jiangxi province, Mao and his supporters began creating their own peasant-based government. The Soviet, of which Mao became chairman, expanded so quickly that it soon included several million people under its control. The nationalists, however, became alarmed, and between 1930 and 1933, Chiang Kai-shek launched 4 military campaigns with the aim of encircling and annihilating the Jiangxi Soviet. Each of the assaults was repulsed by acts of guerrilla warfare. The Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party gradually took power from Mao by radicalizing his land reform. When Chiang Kai-shek launched his 5th military campaign against the Soviet in 1933, the new leadership adopted a policy of fixed positional warfare, and they were overwhelmed. In October of 1934, the remnants of the Red Army abandoned its base in Jiangxi and began its famous Long March. 14th of October 1934, the Red Army broke through the KMT lines and embarked upon the Long March. In order to escape, many of the wounded and ill, including women and children, were left behind, defended by a group of guerrilla fighters whom, when overrun by the KMT, were massacred. The 100,000 that escaped headed first to Hunan and then later, after heavy fighting, arrived in Guizhou province, where they took the city of Zunyi in January 1935. After a conference while recuperating in the city, Mao was re-elected as leader, in effect with both party and the Red Army. Insisting on operating as a guerrilla force, they headed north to Shaanxi province, where they could focus on fighting the Japanese. Mao's belief was that in choosing the anti-imperialist struggle against Japanese invaders, the communists would earn the trust of the Chinese people, who would in turn renounce the KMT. On their arrival in Shaanxi and the safety of the Shaanxi Soviet, only 7,000 to 8,000 of the 100,000 had survived the enduring Long March. Mao was the undisputed leader of the Communist Party, although he would not be officially proclaimed its party chairman until 1943. With the arrival of other soldiers, Mao commanded around 15,000 by February 1936. They created the Northwest Anti-Japanese Red Army University in Yan'an and began training new recruits. By January 1937, they began operations of guerrilla warfare against Japanese-controlled areas. Western reporters were invited to bring international attention to their cause. During the Long March, Mao's wife, He Zedong, had suffered shrapnel wounds to her head. She was taken to Moscow for treatment. Meanwhile, Mao divorced her and married an actress known as Jiang Jin. His former wife in Moscow was sent to a mental asylum. Mao, meanwhile, began to believe that the Red Army on its own could not defeat the Japanese and sought out an alliance with the KMT to achieve the goal of removing the Japanese from Chinese soil. Although he despised Chiang Kai-shek, regarding him as a traitor to the Chinese nation, he sent the request of a military alliance. Chiang had every intention of ignoring the telegram sent by Mao and continue the civil war. However, Chiang was apprehended by one of his own generals and forced to discuss the matter with the communists. And this created the United Front, formed on December 25, 1937. By this time, the Japanese were in control of both Shanghai and Nanjing. The latter included the Nanjing massacre and were pushing inland toward Chongqing. The brutal regime of the Japanese led to more Chinese joining the fight, and by August 1938, more than 500,000 were recruited into the Red Army. In August of 1940, the 100 Regiments Offensive saw 400,000 soldiers simultaneously attack the Japanese across 5 provinces. It was the first major military success and resulted in the deaths of more than 20,000 Japanese soldiers, the disruption of Japanese-controlled railway lines, as well as the loss of a coal mine. In 1944, the US sent a special diplomatic envoy known as the Dixie Mission to the Chinese Communist Party. The American soldiers were impressed by what they witnessed, with little to no corruption, unified armies, and a vigorous resistance to Japan, more evident than what was seen by the KMT. At the end of the mission, however, those contacts that had been established meant very little, as once World War II ended, the US continued their diplomatic and military assistance to Chiang Kai-shek and the KMT, resuming the Civil War. The idea of a coalition government was abandoned before it began, and the People's Liberation Army, or PLA, began by Mao Zedong, was supported by the Soviet Union and occupied the northeast of China in March 1946. The city of Changchun, under KMT control, was starved out in June until October of 1948, in which an estimated 160,000 people perished. The KMT suffered further heavy losses in 1949, and by the 10th of December 1949, the cities of Chongqing and Chengdu were under siege. Meanwhile, Chiang Kai-shek fled to the island of Taiwan. People's Republic of China. On the 1st of October 1949, at the Gate of Heavenly Peace in Tiananmen, Mao announced the establishment of the People's Republic of China, and later that week declared that the Chinese people have stood up. Mao then travelled to Moscow for prolonged talks over that winter. Those talks included the focus on political and economic revolution for China, foreign policy, railways, naval bases, as well as Soviet economic and technical aid. The resulting treaty reflected Stalin's willingness to aid Mao. That is all for this video. If you have enjoyed watching and it's shown you a little detail of life here in China, then your subscribing to my channel would mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching. Make sure you click on the link to the next video, and until the next time, goodbye for now.